I stood frozen as her words fell like cut glass. We were in a big dining room with tall windows and silver plates that glinted under chandelier light. Victoria sat at the head of the table. Her voice was calm, but the words were sharp. "You're not good enough for my son." The room went quiet. My breath felt small in my chest. I had come to meet Ethan's mother for the first time. I had wanted it to be gentle, to be normal. Instead, everyone at the table looked at me like I'd shown up in the wrong story. Ethan's face changed. He looked away. I tried to smile. It felt thin and useless. Victoria's hands were folded on a napkin, her rings catching the light. Around us, forks stopped and people glanced down at their plates. Someone cleared their throat. My throat felt dry. I wanted to say something strong, to tell her she was wrong, but words felt heavy, like stones in my mouth. I kept my hands in my lap, fingers curling in on themselves. The dinner kept moving. Conversation tried to fill the hole she made, but every topic landed wrong after that. I could feel the way they judged my dress, my hands, my laugh. Ethan touched my knee once, but it felt small and not protective. Victoria smiled at him the way people smile when they know they have won. I felt like someone watching myself from far away. I wanted to leave. My chest tightened. When the night ended, the drive home was silent. Ethan tried to explain, saying, "She didn't mean it that way." His words slid from his mouth like oil. I had heard enough. I had worked hard for everything I had. I had put myself through school and paid rent on time. In that car, my hands on the wheel, I felt the highest hurt I'd felt so far. The insult was not only to me. It was to all the years I'd earned. I told myself then, in that quiet midnight, that I would not let her words be the last thing that shaped me. If you think she deserved that, hit subscribe for more true revenge stories. I held my smile like a fragile cup. When Victoria said what she said, I had practiced being polite for situations exactly like this one. I had learned that being small and quiet kept the peace. In the dining room after the remark, I answered in a steady voice, "I'm sorry you feel that way." The words came out soft. They were not the fire people might expect. I was tired of loud fights that left me raw. I wanted to stay calm, to prove I could be better than the anger in front of me. Victoria looked at me with something like amusement. "Don't apologize, just know your place," she said. That hurt like an open hand. Her words were meant to pin me down, neat as a label. Around the table, polite faces pretended not to notice. They looked at me the way the rich sometimes looked at people who weren't rich, curious, bored, and sure of their rightness. Ethan didn't speak up for me. He watched his mother with the loyalty of someone still learning who he should be loyal to. My face kept its calm, but something inside steadied into a cold focus. I did not shout. I did not storm out. I kept my voice low and civil. I was not going to kneel to their judgment, but I also wasn't going to give them the drama they wanted. Later, alone in my small kitchen, my heart pounded hard enough I could feel it in my throat. I replayed the dinner like a movie, frame by frame, searching for some small mercy. There was none. The apology I had offered felt useless, like a bandage over a deeper crack. That night, I sat on my tiny couch and stared at the ceiling. I felt both ashamed and angry, shame because their judgment had landed, anger because it had landed. I had earned every step I'd taken in life. I had paid for my classes and my apartment with double shifts and late nights. Victoria's words tried to erase that. I promised myself then that I would not accept that erasure. I would not make room for anyone who wanted to decide my value. I remembered my past like a photograph with soft edges. I had grown up in a small apartment with my dad and 2 old suitcases we never used. My father worked long hours and came home tired, but he always made time to listen. He taught me to fix things and to be honest. He taught me that hard work mattered, and that I could hold myself up. I'd paid for college with my own sweat. I'd taken night shifts at the diner, washed dishes until my hands tingled, and studied in break rooms with cheap coffee. Nobody handed me anything. School felt like a ladder I climbed rung by rung. The other kids sometimes laughed at my worn backpacks, and the way I counted change. It made me hold on to small wins tighter. When I graduated, I cried because I had done it, and because my dad's pride felt like a warm coat. I worked at jobs that asked for more than they gave. I learned to be careful with money and to roll with the punches. I got good at stretching $10 into 2 meals when I had to. I was proud of the life I'd built from small, honest things. My apartment was modest, but it was mine. I kept a plant on the windowsill, and a stack of library books. When I told people about my father, their faces softened. He was simple and kind, and he loved me fiercely. I carried him in the way I set my jaw when things were hard. I never liked to tell anyone I'd struggled because the telling felt like asking for pity. Instead, I used my story like fuel. I used it to push forward. So when Victoria looked at me like I was less, I felt something inside me flare. I had learned to be proud of the small things. Her words tried to shave off those parts of me. I would not let her do that. Not quietly. Not ever again. Ethan tried to smooth things over later. We sat on the bed in my small apartment with the city lights soft outside the window. He said, "She didn't mean it that way. People like my mother speak without thinking." His voice had that tired softness of someone trying to be reasonable. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the easy fix. I wanted to accept his excuse and fold the night away like a bad page. But the truth sat heavy between us. I remembered how his hand had hovered near mine during dinner, and then pulled away. He had not defended me. He had not told his mother to stop. He had let her words roll over me like a wave. She meant every word, I said quietly. And so did you, by not defending me. My voice trembled but did not break. I needed him to see that silence can be as loud as a shout. I needed him to know that ignoring cruelty is its own kind of consent. Ethan's face shifted. He was young in his ways, the kind of man who grew up with comfort and learned the rules that go with it. He flinched at my words as though he had not known he would hurt me. He said he loved me, and that of course he would stand by me. I wanted to believe him, but the film of the dinner was still stuck in my mind, Victoria's smile, the cold of her words, my own hands, small and clenched. We tried to talk for hours. He promised to call his mother and explain. But promises felt thin after the night I had. I felt like a small boat bobbing, waiting for the tide to decide. At dawn, I walked to the kitchen and made coffee, hands steady. I had decisions to make. I could let this go and hope he would change, or I could start to build a life that did not need saving. The thought of always needing rescue made my stomach tighten. The heartbreak came at a charity gala a few weeks later. It was one of those rooms filled with polite applause and expensive perfumes. Victoria found me by the buffet, as if she had been waiting to strike again. She laughed loud and leaned close to a group of people, pointing at my dress and whispering for the room to hear. "Isn't that the cheap dress you told me about?" she asked like a joke. Everyone else laughed. I felt all the air leave me. Ethan sat at a table across from us and watched. He did not move to stop her. I remember the sting, the sound of laughter that felt like knives. I excused myself and left before anyone could see my face wet. In the car, under the streetlights, the city looked too bright and too cold. I remembered all the times I had covered for other people, all the nights I had swallowed shame to keep peace. I had nothing left to swallow. When I got home, I opened a desk drawer and found the half-written business plan I'd been working on between shifts. It had been tucked under invoices and salt-stained napkins. I had an idea for a small app for local stores, something to help them track deliveries and manage stock. The plan had been a whisper of a dream, too small for the rooms I'd been in, but big enough for me. As I read the lines, something in me shifted. The humiliation that night felt like a match striking dry paper. I did not call Ethan. I did not cry on his shoulder. I shut the door and whispered to myself, I'll never need anyone's approval again. The words felt like a promise and a challenge. I sat at the desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed. I started to type. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding heart. The words from last night still burned, cheap dress. I stared at my reflection in the mirror and saw not weakness, but a kind of hunger. The humiliation had burned something clean inside me. I turned to my laptop. My half-finished business plan waited like an open door. I whispered, it's time. I called my manager that afternoon and quit my job. He looked shocked. You sure you can afford that? He asked. I smiled. No. But I can't afford not to try. Everyone said I was crazy. My father worried. My friends warned me. But deep down, I knew this was the only way to silence every voice that ever told me I wasn't enough. I sold my car, moved into a smaller apartment, and lived off savings. Every morning, I worked at my kitchen table. I wrote code until my eyes ached and learned design from free tutorials. I named the platform LogistiLink because it would connect small local businesses to the big supply chains that ignored them. There were nights I cried from exhaustion. I ate instant noodles and drank black coffee to stay awake. But every small success, a working prototype, a test order that went through, felt like sunlight through clouds. I was building something real. One night, I looked out the window and saw the lights of the city. Somewhere out there Victoria was probably sipping wine in her big house, believing she had broken me. I smiled at that thought. Because in a way, she had. But the pieces she broke were the ones that kept me from seeing what I could be. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the first step toward the kind of power she'd never understand. The days turned into weeks. The app grew piece by piece. Some nights I doubted everything. Who would use it? Who would trust me? But then I'd remember my father's voice. Hard work always answers back. When I wasn't coding, I was researching. When I wasn't researching, I was emailing small shops. Most never replied. A few sent polite no's. Still, I pushed forward. My apartment turned into an office. Sticky notes covered the walls. I had no investors, no fancy team, just a stubborn will. Bills piled up. My stomach ached from too much coffee and too little food. But I was free. I had no boss, no one to tell me my place. Every rejection felt less like failure and more like training. I began to see patterns, holes in the logistics world that no one else noticed. I spent one whole night sketching a logo, a chain of small dots turning into one strong line. Make the invisible indispensable, I wrote under it. That became my motto. It reminded me of every worker who got ignored, every small shop that people looked past. By the end of that year, I had a prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I smiled through tears as I watched the first delivery tracked from order to arrival. I had done it on my own. That night, I wrote a single line in my notebook, I'll build something they can't ignore. If you think she deserves her comeback, hit subscribe for more true revenge stories. My best friend, Tara, became my anchor. She had been there through every heartbreak and late-night breakdown. When I told her about LogistiLink, she grinned and said, "Don't get even, Lena. Get ahead." She was right. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone, not Ethan, not his mother. Success would do that for me. So I worked harder. Tara helped design the marketing page. She took photos for free, helped pitch to local stores, even cooked meals when I forgot to eat. Slowly, people began to notice. One small bakery used the app to manage their suppliers. Then a bookstore. Then a small chain of cafes. Orders flowed smoothly. Owners sent thank you emails that made me cry. The app that started from heartbreak was changing lives. Still, every time I looked at the company's homepage, I heard Victoria's voice, "Know your place." I whispered back, "Watch me change it." Months passed. I grew stronger. My name began showing up in small business blogs. Investors started reaching out. I wore thrift store clothes to meetings but spoke with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. When Tara hugged me after our first profitable month, she said, "This is just the beginning." I didn't know it then, but she was right. Because soon, fate was about to circle back and bring Victoria right into my path again. A year later, LogistiLink was no longer a secret. It was a movement. Small businesses shared success stories online, calling it a game changer. Investors who once ignored me now wanted meetings. For the first time, I could pay myself a salary. I bought a second-hand office desk and hired 2 part-timers. They were fresh graduates, eager to learn. Every morning, I arrived early with coffee for everyone. The room buzzed with energy, the kind I used to dream about. But deep inside, I carried a quiet promise. One day, I would stand in front of Victoria again, not as Ethan's ex or the girl she mocked, but as someone she'd have to respect. Then one afternoon, I got an email from a big corporation, Everline Group. They wanted a presentation on small business logistics integration. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. My hands trembled as I read it. That night, I researched their executives. My breath caught when I saw the name, Victoria Alden, Chief Operating Officer. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I started to laugh. The world had just handed me the sweetest setup imaginable. The day of the meeting, I dressed in a tailored navy suit. Nothing fancy, but clean, confident, and mine. I arrived early at Everline's towering glass building, carrying my laptop and presentation binder. The receptionist directed me to the boardroom. When Victoria walked in and saw me, her face froze. Her lips parted, eyes widening in disbelief. "You're the presenter." I smiled politely. "One of many." "Let's get started." The room filled with executives. I presented with calm precision. Charts, numbers, real success stories from small businesses that now thrived because of LogistiLink. Every question they asked, I answered with ease. Even the CEO nodded, impressed. Victoria tried to interrupt once, suggesting security flaws. I responded with data that proved her wrong. Her fake smile didn't reach her eyes. I could see the panic growing. When the meeting ended, the CEO shook my hand. "Impressive work, Ms. Ruiz. Expect a call soon." As I left, I caught Victoria's reflection in the window, tight smile, stiff posture. The woman who once told me to know my place was watching me claim it. Outside, I exhaled slowly. The city felt alive again, every sound sharp and full of promise. I whispered to myself, "Round 1 goes to me." 2 weeks later, I got the call. Everline Group approved the partnership with LogistiLink. My hands trembled as I hung up the phone. This was the kind of deal that could double our size overnight. Tara screamed when I told her. We jumped around the office like kids, laughing, half in disbelief. I could already picture the headlines, "Small startup joins forces with Everline Group." But deep down, I knew what this really meant. I was about to walk straight into Victoria's world again, not as her son's girlfriend, but as her equal. Maybe even her threat. We signed the initial documents. The next few weeks were chaos, meetings, data transfers, new hires. Victoria avoided me, sending assistants instead. But I could feel her presence behind every slow email and extra approval step. She was testing me. I didn't flinch. The first time I saw her again in person, she acted as if we barely knew each other. "Ms. Ruiz," she said coolly, "pleased to work with you." "Likewise," I replied. I smiled, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. That night, I stood at my office window overlooking the city. Lights shimmered below like a map of every dream I'd ever chased. Victoria had once told me I wasn't good enough for her son. Now, I was building a future her entire company needed. I whispered softly, "You wanted me to know my place. Here it is, at the top." Everything moved fast after that. Everline's executives loved our system. Within months, we had expanded across 3 new cities. The numbers were rising faster than I could track. My inbox filled with investor interest and job requests. But the tension inside Everline grew too. Victoria didn't like the attention I was getting. During meetings, she interrupted me, corrected my phrasing, even claimed credit for some of our integration strategies. I didn't react. I smiled through every jab and documented everything. One afternoon, she sent me a message marked urgent. When I opened it, my proposal draft had vanished from Everline's shared drive. The system showed her name as the last to access it. I backed up every file, every email. Something told me this wasn't an accident. Later that week, the CEO called asking for the final proposal. Victoria told him there were security concerns about LogistiLink. Her tone was smooth, practiced. But I had already uploaded a backup to a private drive with timestamps and proof she'd modified the file. The CEO asked me to resend the document directly. He compared both versions, mine untouched, hers edited to insert fake errors. His expression darkened. That night, as I closed my laptop, I thought, the first stone has shifted. She didn't know it yet, but the fall had begun. The next morning, I was called into a private meeting. The CEO, Mr. Carver, sat behind a long table. Victoria was already there, her posture stiff. "Ms. Ruiz," he began, "thank you for resending your proposal. It appears some files were altered after submission." His tone was calm but firm. "Do you know anything about that?" I met Victoria's eyes and answered evenly, "Only that I trusted your internal systems to protect my work." He turned to Victoria. "Can you explain these discrepancies?" Her face flushed slightly. "There must be a mistake. Perhaps IT." "IT confirmed your login credentials," he interrupted. Silence filled the room. I could almost hear her heartbeat from across the table. After the meeting, Victoria brushed past me, whispering sharply, "You think you've won something? Don't test me." I watched her walk away, heels clicking like gunshots down the hallway. For the first time, she looked afraid. 2 days later, Everline officially approved the partnership with LogistiLink. The announcement came with press coverage. My photo appeared beside the headline, "Young Entrepreneur Partners with Industry Giant." When I saw it online, I didn't feel triumph. I felt balance, like the universe had just corrected a long-held lie. That night, Tara brought over champagne. We toasted quietly in my apartment. To the woman they said wasn't good enough, she said. I clinked my glass against hers. And to the lesson they'll never forget. 6 months later, LogistiLink was everywhere. Our user base quadrupled. Investors called daily. Articles called me the woman transforming logistics for small businesses. Victoria tried to ignore me, but she couldn't. Her own boss praised me during every board meeting. Once, I caught her expression when he said, "We're lucky to have partnered with Ms. Ruiz." It was the exact mix of disbelief and fear I had once seen in her eyes the first night we met. Still, she fought back. She tightened control on her departments, took credit for company growth, and whispered that I was too ambitious. I didn't respond. Silence can be its own kind of weapon. One Friday afternoon, an invitation arrived, Everline's 50th anniversary gala. I almost laughed. It was the same type of event where she had humiliated me years ago. Now I was being honored as a key partner. Tara saw the invitation and grinned. "You have to go. It's the perfect stage." I agreed. But I didn't go to humiliate her. I went to show her what real success looked like, grace under fire. That night, I stood before the mirror in a black gown, simple but stunning. My reflection didn't look like revenge. It looked like peace earned through fire. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and soft music. When I entered, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some recognized me from the press articles. Others simply sensed that something big was about to happen. I caught sight of Victoria at the far end of the room. Her face stiffened, but she masked it quickly, offering a brittle smile. I returned it, warm, polite, perfect. As the evening went on, I mingled with investors and executives. People asked about LogistiLink's growth. I spoke confidently, always keeping my tone measured. I wasn't here for vengeance, I was here for victory that spoke for itself. Then came the moment. The CEO took the microphone and smiled at the crowd. Tonight, we celebrate 50 years of Everline, and the future we're building together. I'm proud to announce our upcoming merger with our fastest-growing logistics partner. A slide appeared on the screen behind him. The logo of LogistiLink glowed bright under the lights. Gasps rippled through the room. Then my name appeared, founder and CEO Lena Ruiz. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. I saw Victoria's smile falter, her hands frozen mid-clap. Her world had just tilted. I stood there accepting the applause not as the woman she'd dismissed, but as the one she now worked for. After the applause faded, I felt every gaze on me, admiring, curious, astonished. The CEO handed me the microphone. Ms. Ruiz, would you like to say a few words? My heart thumped hard, but my voice came out steady. Thank you, Mr. Carver. Thank you to Everline for believing that innovation doesn't depend on background or connections, but on work, integrity, and courage. I paused deliberately before adding, some of us have had to prove our worth twice just to be seen once. A hush fell over the crowd. People clapped again, louder this time. I could see Victoria's face tighten as she realized the crowd was no longer hers. She turned to whisper something to Ethan, who had appeared at her side, awkward and pale. When the speeches ended, guests gathered in small circles. Cameras followed me. Victoria slipped away, her smile cracked at the edges. That night, I walked out of the ballroom under the glittering lights feeling lighter than I had in years. The next morning, a message arrived in my inbox from Victoria herself. Congratulations. You've done well. But remember, power shifts quickly in this world. I stared at the screen for a long time. Her warning didn't scare me, it confirmed she still believed this was a game of hierarchy. But I wasn't playing anymore. I was building. The next week, our merger meetings began. My lawyers reviewed documents that would give me not just partnership but ownership stakes. Every signature brought me closer to a truth she could never escape. I had become the person she once told her son was not good enough. The merger finalized in spring. LogistiLink Everline became the new name, and my name was listed beside the CEO's on every press release. We moved into a larger headquarters downtown. The lobby displayed our combined logo on shining glass. I watched Victoria walk through those doors every morning now, no longer above me, just another executive reporting to the new leadership board. She hid her discomfort behind her usual crisp smile, but her eyes told the truth. The CEO, Mr. Carver, called me into his office one afternoon. We're restructuring departments. You'll oversee integration strategy. That puts you above logistics, finance, and operations, including Victoria's branch. For a second, I didn't move. The universe had a strange way of balancing things. Understood, I said finally, my tone calm. That evening, I called Tara. It's official. I'm technically her boss now. Tara screamed into the phone. You're kidding. That's poetic justice. We laughed until tears came. But later, alone, I thought about how strange it felt. I didn't feel hunger for revenge anymore, just closure. I didn't need to humiliate her. She'd done that to herself. Still, I knew her pride wouldn't let her rest quietly. And I was right. Within weeks, whispers reached me about her undermining new initiatives, claiming my team mishandled operations. She was fighting to stay relevant. I was focused on growing. Only one of us was moving forward. 6 months passed. LogistiLink Everline tripled its revenue. Our merger became a case study for innovation in major business magazines. My photo appeared beside headlines like "The Woman Who Redefined Logistics." Investors flooded in. Clients expanded. Everything I had dreamed of when I first opened my laptop in that tiny apartment was now real. Victoria avoided me as much as possible. But every quarterly meeting forced her to face what she had lost: control, image, and the illusion that she was untouchable. I noticed the subtle tremor in her voice when she spoke. Then came the board audit. Her department had underperformed for 2 consecutive quarters. I didn't need to say a word, the numbers spoke for themselves. Mr. Carver called me into his office. "Her section isn't meeting targets. What do you recommend?" I paused, remembering every insult she'd thrown, every look that said I was beneath her. But I also remembered my father's advice: real power doesn't shout, it decides. "I think she needs a new environment," I said. "Somewhere she can learn humility and hands-on leadership." He nodded slowly. "Reassignment it is." The next week, Victoria received her notice. "Effective immediately, you are reassigned as Regional Liaison, Midwest Division." From a corner office to a cubicle 2 states away, signed by me. Victoria stormed into my office the next morning, face red with fury. "You humiliated me," she hissed. "You planned all of this." I stayed seated, calm. "No," I said softly. "I worked for this." "You think you're better than me now," she snapped. I met her eyes. "No. I just stopped believing you were better than me." For a moment, she had no words. Years of pride and entitlement crumbled right there in front of my desk. Then she turned sharply and left, heels echoing through the hallway like the last notes of a fading song. The next day, a news article went viral: "Woman once mocked by executive, now her boss." Photos from the gala resurfaced, showing Victoria's stunned face when my name had appeared on the merger screen. The story spread fast. Messages poured in from women around the country. "You gave me hope. This is what poetic justice looks like." It wasn't just my story anymore. It had become a symbol. Still, I felt something quieter inside, relief mixed with sadness. I didn't need her downfall to feel complete. But I was grateful the world had finally seen what she couldn't. The power I'd wanted wasn't revenge. It was the freedom to be proud without permission. A few months later, Ethan showed up at my office unannounced. He looked older, his eyes tired. "Mom's miserable," he said quietly. "She can't stop talking about you." I studied him. He was the same man who once sat silent while his mother mocked me. Now he seemed smaller somehow. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked. He sighed. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. For that night, for everything. I should have stood up for you." I looked out the window at the city skyline. "You're right. You should have." He hesitated. "You've changed." "I had to," I said. "You can't survive being underestimated unless you grow beyond the limits people put on you." He nodded, eyes full of regret. "Mom was wrong about you." I smiled faintly. "I know." As he left, I felt no spark, no longing. The part of me that once waited for his approval was gone. That evening, I walked through the office halls after everyone had left. My reflection glimmered in the glass walls, strong, composed, whole. I whispered to myself, they said I wasn't good enough. Turns out, I was more than they could handle. The night of the next grand gala came faster than I expected. It was Everline's biggest annual event, this time celebrating the official 1-year success of the merger. Invitations had gone out to media, clients, and government officials. My name was printed right below the CEO's. I arrived in a sleek silver gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Cameras flashed and reporters called out my name. I smiled for them, calm and composed. The same kind of event where Victoria once laughed at my cheap dress was now honoring me as the woman who transformed Everline's future. Inside, whispers followed me. That's her. The startup founder who changed the industry. Didn't Victoria used to hate her? Across the room, I saw Victoria arrive late. Her dress was elegant, but her posture gave away her discomfort. When our eyes met, she offered a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. I gave her one in return, gentle, not cruel. During dinner, I sat beside Mr. Carver. He leaned over and said, "You've done something rare, Lena. You turned humiliation into leadership." The band started to play, and I glanced toward Victoria's table. She looked smaller than before, like the air of command she once wore had finally faded. I took a slow breath, tasting victory not as sweetness but as calm. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The world had already done that for me. Halfway through the evening, Mr. Carver rose to speak. The room fell silent as his voice echoed through the microphone. 1 year ago, Everline merged with a young, fast-growing startup led by a woman of vision and resilience. Tonight, we honor that success. I looked down, heart steady but racing at the same time. He continued, "Our future depends on leaders who build bridges, not barriers. And no one embodies that more than Lena Ruiz." A huge image appeared on the screen behind him, the LogistiLink Everline logo shining bright. Applause filled the hall, thunderous and sincere. I stood, smiled, and accepted the microphone. "I used to believe success was about being accepted," I said softly. "But now I know, it's about creating space where you belong without asking." People rose to their feet. The sound felt like waves. When I looked across the room, Victoria was frozen. Her fork had slipped from her hand. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked lost. I held her gaze for a moment before turning back to the crowd. "Thank you," I said, voice clear. "Let's build a future where no one is told they're not good enough." Applause again. Cameras flashed. It was done. After the speech, people swarmed around me, executives, journalists, investors. Victoria didn't approach. She stood near the exit, quiet, watching everything unravel around her. When the crowd thinned, she came forward. Her tone was sharp, but there was a tremor beneath it. "You planned this," she hissed. I shook my head slowly. "No. I worked for it." She glared at me, searching for arrogance in my expression and finding only calm. "You think you've won?" "I don't need to win, Victoria," I said gently. "I just needed to stop losing myself to people like you." For a heartbeat, her lips trembled, but then she straightened her shoulders and walked away. Later that night, I went home and stood on my balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, and the stars seemed brighter than usual. My phone buzzed with messages from reporters wanting quotes. I ignored them. Tara called. "How'd it go?" I smiled. "Perfectly. She saw you, didn't she?" "Oh, she saw me," I said, laughing softly. "And she'll never forget what she saw." The next day, the newspapers carried the story, "From insulted girlfriend to industry powerhouse." The headline made me laugh out loud. Justice didn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrived quietly, wearing your smile. The following weeks were busy. Meetings stacked on meetings. Our integration process completed smoothly, and the merger was officially one company now. One morning, Mr. Carver called me into his office again. "We're reviewing executive performance. Victoria's department numbers keep dropping. I need your thoughts." I looked out the window, watching the city traffic below. "Her leadership style doesn't fit our new direction," I said. "Maybe reassign her somewhere smaller, where she can learn to rebuild." He nodded. "We'll do that." You'll have final approval. That afternoon, I signed the reassignment papers myself. They were just a few pages, printed in neat black ink. I paused for a moment before adding my signature. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like accountability. 2 days later, Victoria received her notice. Her title changed from COO to Regional Liaison, Midwest Division. From the top floor to a shared cubicle space 2 states away. When she stormed into my office afterward, I was ready. "You humiliated me," she shouted. "No," I said evenly. "I educated you." Her face twisted in shock. "You'll regret this." "I already regret giving you the chance to underestimate me," I replied calmly. She slammed the door behind her. For a long moment, I just sat there. I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. The next morning, I woke up to chaos online. Every major news outlet had picked up the story, woman once mocked by executive now her boss. The photo from the gala, Victoria frozen mid-smile as my name appeared behind her, was everywhere. My inbox overflowed with messages. Women wrote to thank me. Young entrepreneurs said they felt inspired. Some called it karma. Others called it courage. I didn't correct any of them. I just smiled, knowing that the truth was simpler. I had taken pain and built something from it. Victoria tried to fight back with whispers, telling old contacts that I'd stolen ideas, that I was arrogant. But the story had already turned against her. The world loved a redemption arc, especially when the villain was exposed by her own pride. Mr. Carver called me that afternoon. "You've become the face of this company," he said. "I hope you're ready for it." "I've been ready since the night she told me I wasn't good enough," I replied. That evening, I met Tara for dinner. She raised her glass and said, "To poetic justice." I smiled. "No," I said softly. "To hard work, and the patience to let the world catch up." We clinked glasses. Outside, the city lights shimmered like applause. A few weeks later, the corporate restructuring meetings began. I was now one of the key decision-makers on the new leadership board. Sitting at that long glass table, I could feel how far I'd come, from late-night ramen to marble conference rooms. During one of the sessions, Mr. Carver leaned close. "Victoria's department continues to underperform. Her staff morale is low. Any suggestions?" I took a breath, steady and calm. "Maybe it's time for new leadership. Someone who can rebuild trust." He nodded thoughtfully. "Do you have someone in mind?" "Yes," I said. "Her deputy, Rachel. She's capable and fair." The room agreed. The motion passed. Victoria's name was officially removed from the internal roster of senior executives. I watched her title disappear from the screen, without a flicker of guilt. When the meeting ended, I walked out onto the balcony overlooking downtown. The wind was soft against my face. I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about growth, mine and the company's. Victoria's reassignment paperwork landed on my desk later that afternoon. I read it carefully, then signed it. The pen didn't shake. I didn't gloat. I simply finished what she had started years ago when she tried to belittle me. That evening, Tara called. "So is she gone?" "Almost," I said, smiling. "Sometimes justice takes the form of a signature." And I meant it. Because it wasn't about power anymore. It was about peace. The next day, Victoria received her official notice. It was short and clear, reassignment approved. Effective immediately. I was in a meeting when my assistant whispered, "She's outside." Victoria entered my office without knocking. Her eyes burned with anger. "You think this is fair?" she snapped. "After everything I've done for this company." I stood slowly, meeting her gaze. "You mean everything you did for yourself?" She slammed her hands on my desk. "You'll regret this, Lena. You've embarrassed me in front of everyone." I remained calm. No, Victoria. You embarrassed yourself the day you decided people's worth came from money and titles. For a long second, neither of us spoke. Then she grabbed the notice from my desk, crumpled it, and stormed out. Her heels clicked like gunfire down the hall. When the door closed, I exhaled deeply. Tara called later that evening, laughing. I can't believe it. The Queen dethroned. But I didn't laugh. I sat by my window, watching the lights of the city, feeling strangely empty. The victory didn't taste sweet, it just tasted done. The story exploded online the next morning. Executive who mocked woman now works under her. Every major outlet ran it. There were side-by-side photos, Victoria in her old corner office, and me standing beside the company's new logo. My social media filled with messages. Some congratulated me. Some begged for interviews. I declined them all. I didn't want to talk about revenge anymore. I wanted to talk about building. Still, I couldn't deny the poetic justice. Every time someone shared the story, I thought of the girl who once sat in a cheap dress, listening to laughter that cut deep. That girl would have cried with pride now. Victoria, meanwhile, had been reassigned to a small Midwest office. I heard through HR that she struggled to adjust. The staff found her distant, sometimes cruel. The once feared executive now answered to regional managers half her age. When the board asked for my approval to finalize her transfer, I signed without hesitation. It wasn't punishment, it was consequence. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine and looked out over the skyline. My reflection in the window seemed older, wiser, and freer. Some wars are won not through battle but through silence. Weeks passed. My life filled with travel, conferences, and new projects. LogistiLink Everline expanded internationally. I met with investors in Europe, spoke at panels, and launched mentoring programs for women in tech. But even with all the success, there were nights when I sat alone and remembered everything, the sting of humiliation, the long nights coding in that tiny apartment, my father's quiet pride. Those memories grounded me. They reminded me why I worked so hard. Then one morning, an internal report landed on my desk. Victoria had been spreading rumors again, accusing executives of unethical partnerships. HR investigated. The claims were false. Mr. Carver called me. You want me to handle it? No, I said softly. I'll take care of it. That afternoon, I signed one final document, termination effective immediately. No ceremony. No announcement. Just a quiet end to the noise she had created for years. I watched the HR rep carry the envelope down the hall. For a moment, I felt a sting of pity. But then I thought of the girl she once made cry in front of strangers. That memory faded, replaced by something cleaner, peace. It was over. A week later, Ethan showed up again. He looked uneasy. Mom got fired, he said, as if I didn't already know. I heard, I said quietly. She's broken. I don't know what to do. I nodded, not out of sympathy but understanding. That's what happens when your whole world depends on power. Once it's gone, you have nothing left. He sighed. She blames you. I know, I said. But this was never about blame. It was about truth. He looked at me with soft eyes. You've changed. I had to, I said again. Some people grow when they're hurt. Others just break. He gave a small, sad smile. I was wrong back then. You deserved better. I smiled faintly. You're right. And I found it. As he left, I felt a strange peace settle over me. I didn't need him, or his apology, or his love. I had built my own closure. That night, standing on my balcony, I whispered into the city lights, you told me I wasn't good enough for your son. Now your son is learning what real strength looks like. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was freedom. The weeks after Victoria's termination felt strange, quiet, almost peaceful. The company settled into rhythm again. There was no more whispering in the hallways, no more tension in meetings. For the first time in years, Everline felt calm. But I noticed something in myself too. I didn't feel the triumph I thought would come. No rush of victory. No satisfaction from her downfall. Just a quiet stillness. One evening, I stayed late at the office. The city lights glittered through the glass walls. I stood looking out, remembering everything, my humiliation, my heartbreak, the sleepless nights that built LogistiLink. It all felt so far away, like someone else's life. Tara called, her voice cheerful. So she's gone for good? Yes, I said softly. And how do you feel? I thought for a long time before answering. Lighter, I said finally. But not happy. Just done. Tara paused. Maybe that's what real closure feels like. After the call, I whispered to myself, some wars aren't won when the other person falls. They're won the moment you stop caring whether they do. I packed my things, shut off the lights, and left the office behind. As the elevator doors closed, I smiled faintly. I had climbed the mountain that once looked impossible, and at the top, I had found peace instead of revenge. I threw myself into new projects. If Victoria had been my shadow, now there was room for light. I launched a mentorship program for women in business, simple, direct, and powerful. Our slogan read, "We rise by ignoring permission." It became more than a phrase. It became a movement. Young entrepreneurs signed up in droves, many telling me my story had inspired them to start their own ventures. At the first workshop, I stood before a room full of eager faces and said, "Success isn't about fitting in, it's about building a place where you belong." The applause that followed filled me with something deeper than pride. It felt like purpose. Every story they shared reminded me why I had started LogistiLink, to help the unseen become indispensable. Later, Tara hugged me after the event. "You're not just running a company anymore, Lena," she said. "You're building a legacy." Driving home that night, I thought about my father. I wished he could have seen this. The world that once shut me out had become my platform. Revenge had brought me here, but purpose would take me further. Months passed. I focused on growth, but the past had a way of circling back. One rainy afternoon, I stopped at a quiet cafe near the office. I ordered coffee, sat by the window, and looked up and froze. Victoria was there. She sat 2 tables away, dressed plainly in a simple gray suit. She looked older, smaller somehow. Gone was the confident executive who once commanded rooms. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed on a cheap laptop. For a long time, I just watched her. A part of me wanted to walk away. But another part, the part that still believed in kindness, wouldn't let me. I stood, walked to the counter, and bought a second coffee. When I placed it on her table, she looked up in shock. "Lena," she whispered. "Hi, Victoria," I said softly. "Thought you could use this." Her eyes darted away. "You must hate me." I sat across from her. "I did," I said honestly. "But I outgrew it." She blinked fast, as if holding back tears. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything." I looked at her gently. "I do. That's how I built everything." She nodded slowly, hands clasped around the warm cup. For the first time, she looked human, not powerful, not cruel, just tired. We sat in silence for a while. The rain tapped softly on the window. Finally, Victoria spoke. "I've been trying to find work," she said quietly. "No one will hire me. My name's ruined." I studied her face. It was pale, her makeup faint. "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Consulting, maybe," she said. "I know the industry. I just don't know how to start over." For a long moment, I thought of every cruel thing she'd said, every tear she'd caused. But then I remembered my father's voice, be the person who ends the cycle, not continues it. I might know someone, I said finally. A friend of mine runs a consultancy firm. I'll mention your name. Quietly. Her eyes widened. Why would you do that? Because revenge is temporary, I said softly. But compassion lasts longer. For the first time, her expression softened. You're a better woman than I ever was, she murmured. I smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe I just learned from the best example of what not to become. When I left the cafe, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace that didn't depend on anyone else's downfall. A few months later, I received an email from that consulting firm. They'd hired Victoria on a short contract. She was doing well, humble, hardworking, and quiet. I stared at the message for a long time, then closed my laptop with a soft smile. Sometimes mercy changes people more than punishment ever could. My own company was thriving. LogistiLink Everline had expanded internationally. I was invited to keynote conferences around the world. The first one was in New York, the same city where Ethan now lived. After my speech, as people crowded around to shake my hand, I saw him waiting at the back. When the room cleared, he stepped forward. You proved everyone wrong, he said. I smiled gently. I didn't need to. I just proved myself right. He nodded. You're different, Lena. I finally became who I was meant to be. As he left, I watched the crowd of young women gathering near the stage, notebooks in hand, full of hope. Maybe that was my real victory, not revenge, not justice, but the ripple effect of surviving and still choosing grace. A year passed before I saw Victoria again. It happened by chance at a business conference in Atlanta. She looked healthier this time, older, yes, but softer around the edges. When she spotted me across the room, she hesitated, then walked over slowly. Lena, she said. I owe you a thank you. That consulting job you helped me get, it gave me a second chance. I smiled gently. I'm glad it worked out. She looked down, twisting her bracelet. I was awful to you. I see that now. I let pride run my life. When everything collapsed, I blamed everyone but myself. But losing everything, it taught me what matters. I could see the honesty in her eyes. For the first time, she wasn't hiding behind a polished smile. She was human, humbled. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I nodded. You don't owe me an apology, Victoria. You just owe yourself the chance to be better. She smiled faintly, eyes glassy. You've changed this industry and me. Thank you for that. We parted with a handshake. There was no bitterness left between us, only understanding. As I watched her walk away, I realized something important: revenge fades, but redemption lasts. I left the conference that evening feeling lighter, as if the last shadow from my past had finally dissolved. The years that followed were a blur of growth and change. LogistiLink Everline went public, our stock soaring higher than any of us imagined. Investors flooded in. Magazines called me one of the top 10 women shaping global logistics. But the real pride came from the foundation I started, the Ruiz Initiative, dedicated to helping young women start businesses of their own. The motto painted across our office wall read, "We rise by lifting others." I was invited to speak at international summits and award ceremonies. My story had become more than just a headline, it was a roadmap for resilience. On stage one night, in front of hundreds, I said, when someone tells you you're not good enough, don't try to change for them. Build something they can't ignore. The audience stood and clapped. I smiled, not for fame or applause, but for the younger version of me, the girl in the cheap dress who once walked out of a gala in tears. She would have never believed how far we'd come. 38 It was at one of those global business summits, years later, that I saw Ethan again. He was older now, a little grayer, but his smile was the same, gentle, regretful. He waited until after my keynote to approach. "Congratulations," he said. "You've built something incredible." "Thank you," I replied, polite but distant. He hesitated, then added, "I'm divorced now. I've learned a lot about what matters. And about what I lost." I met his eyes. "You didn't lose me, Ethan. You just didn't stand up for me when it counted." He nodded, accepting it. "You were right about everything. My mother sees it now too. She speaks highly of you, believe it or not." That made me smile. Then maybe we both found our lessons. He chuckled softly. "You proved everyone wrong." I shook my head. "No, Ethan. I didn't need to prove anyone wrong. I just needed to prove myself right." We parted as friends, two people who once stood on opposite sides of pride, now meeting at peace. As I walked away, I thought about how strange life could be. Sometimes the pain that breaks you is the same force that builds your wings. 39 The following spring, I was honored with the Global Innovation Award. The hall was filled with entrepreneurs from all over the world. As I stood on stage under the golden lights, I felt the weight of every step it took to reach this moment. The presenter handed me the microphone. I smiled at the crowd. When I started, I said, people told me I wasn't good enough. That my background didn't fit their expectations. But I learned something powerful. When they say you're not enough, they really mean you're more than they can handle. Laughter rippled through the crowd, followed by applause. I continued, don't shrink for anyone's comfort. The world doesn't change because you fit in. It changes because you dare to stand out. The applause grew thunderous. Cameras flashed, but I didn't care about fame. What mattered was the quiet strength inside me, the certainty that every wound had turned into wisdom. When the ceremony ended, I stepped off stage and saw Tara waiting in the wings. She hugged me tight. You did it, Lena. I smiled through tears. No. We did. 40 That night, I returned to my hotel room overlooking the city skyline. The streets below glowed with life, horns, laughter, lights flickering like stars. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, thinking of everything that had led me here. Victoria's voice from years ago echoed faintly in my mind, "You're not good enough for my son." I smiled, not with anger but with peace. Because now I knew the truth. I was never meant to be good enough for him. I was meant to be more than enough for myself. In the reflection of the glass, I saw the woman I had become, strong, calm, unafraid. The girl who once begged for acceptance had grown into the woman others now looked up to. I whispered into the quiet, "You told me I wasn't good enough for your son. So I stopped trying to be, and became the woman you now work for." The city lights blinked like applause. I took a slow sip of wine, smiled softly, and whispered, "Justice served." If you think she truly earned her revenge, hit subscribe for more powerful true stories of strength, justice, and redemption. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.